Toot Norbaling would like to welcome you to the third class of Understanding Karma to Create the Future We Want with Eddie Peet. Eddie is an FMP or FPMT teacher, registered teacher, and you can find him most days at the Langri Tampa Center in Brisbane. Did I say that? Is that correct? In Brisbane. Thank you, Eddie, for taking time out of your Monday morning for us, or for you, and Sunday evening for us.
Okay, thank you, Shayla. And hi, everybody. Welcome along to this third class of this module. So I think we begin as we normally do by setting our motivation and doing a short breathing meditation. So please just get comfortable in your seat. So this basically means making sure that your back is straight and your shoulders are relaxed. You can keep your eyes open or closed, and you can place your hands wherever you like. And allowing the body to breathe itself. Become aware of the movements that take place whenever you inhale or exhale the breath. And while your attention is lightly resting on the movements that are taking place within the body, as you breathe normally and naturally, imagine that the Buddhas and the Bodhisattvas arrive from the 10 directions of space to appear in your room, in front and above you. Acknowledge that each one of us wishes to be happy and to be free from suffering and its causes. And to do this, we need to rely upon those who have already done it and the methods that they use to free themselves from suffering and to develop all their good qualities. And these are the Buddhas and the Bodhisattvas in front of us. We think that we're doing this not just for our own sake, but for the sake of every living being. So now let's take refuge in the three rare sublime ones of the Buddha, Dharma, and Sangha. So in your own time, just recite along with me. I go for refuge until I am enlightened, to the Buddha, the Dharma, and the Supreme Assembly. By the merits I create through listening to the Dharma, may I become a Buddha to benefit all sentient beings. I go for refuge until I am enlightened, to the Buddha, the Dharma, and the Supreme Assembly. By the merits I create through listening to the Dharma, may I become a Buddha to benefit all sentient beings. I go for refuge until I am enlightened, to the Buddha, the Dharma, and the Supreme Assembly. By the merits I create through listening to the Dharma, may I become a Buddha to benefit all sentient beings. And they're wishing to stabilize this aspiration of ours. Recollect the four immeasurable thoughts of compassion, love, joy and equanimity. And make the wish that all beings experience these four thoughts. Decide to help others be established in these four ways of being. And I think that in response to this new aspiration, light and nectars pour forth from the heart of the Buddha. They wash over you and all the beings surrounding you. And you and everyone else are established within these four boundless ways of being. Now, while you're in front of the refuge field, see yourself about to partake in prostrating, making offerings, confessing, and so forth. And while you see yourself doing that, you can recite the prayer. So along with me. Reverently, I prostrate with my body, speech, and mind. I present clouds of every type of offering, actual and imagined. I declare all my negative actions accumulated since beginning this time and rejoice in the merit of all holy and ordinary beings. So please remain until the end of cyclic existence and turn the wheel of Dharma for living beings. I dedicate my own and others' merits to the great enlightenment. And now to rid ourselves of the final vestiges of clinging that we have to ourselves and our ideas and to the merit we've generated so far, we will make an offering of a mandala. The thing that your body transforms into this wonderful land and is being offered now to the Buddhas and Bodhisattvas in front of you. So this ground, anointed with perfume, strewn with flowers, adorned with Mount Meru, four continents, the sun and the moon. I imagine this is a Buddha field and offer it. May all living beings enjoy this pure land. Idam Guru Ratna Mandala Kamnayatayami. We release the offering. It's accepted by the Buddha and he smiles at us with delight. And we look up into his eyes. Acknowledging the smile, we feel accepted and at ease. And now an emanation of the Buddha leaves his heart and moves through space to come and abide above the crown of your head. Facing in the same direction you are, this emanation begins to descend, entering your crown, coming down through your body to rest at the level of your heart. The radiance of the Buddha begins to expand, filling your body and mind with light. And the light goes out through the pores of your skin and fills the 10 directions of space. I think you've established all beings in a state of full awakening, and there is no difference between yourself and anyone else. In fact, ideas of self and other have completely vanished. Ideas of inner and outer, all conceptions have fallen away. And you find yourself resting in this non-conceptual state. Now the light begins to withdraw, and as it does so, conventional reality reappears. The light enters your heart, you feel yourself embodied, sitting in your seat, and you're breathing normally and naturally. You acknowledge this is all taking place on the level of imagination, but nevertheless, it's placed an imprint upon your consciousness, which can act as a cause for the result of full enlightenment. So allow yourself to feel good about that. And then breathing in deeply through your nostrils. Exhale through your mouth and allow your eyes to flutter open and find yourself in your seat in front of the screen. Once again, welcome everybody. And let's have a look at what we've gone through in the previous two classes. So we look first of all at what karma is. We know in general it's an action. The Buddha further refined it to be the action of intention. And it's very important because it drives all of our actions and produces different results in response to the things that we engage in, the actions we engage in. These actions are made up of causes and conditions, and probably the most important of the causes is what we call a substantial cause. The difference between a substantial cause and a contributory cause is that the substantial cause actually turns into the effect, whereas the contributory causes support the effect. Last week, we looked at some of the 4 principles of karma, and we looked at the analogy of the seed and the medicinal tree. And this analogy was to show that if you have a medicinal tree, it came from a medicinal seed. So like produces like. It's never the case that virtue produces suffering, and it's never the case that non-virtue produces happiness and higher states of being. And to produce that course, that class and this one coming, I've relied upon a number of different books. So here you can see there's a few newer ones here than the ones I put up last week. In particular, Practical Ethics and Profound Emptiness. It's a very good book to use to support your understanding of karmic cause and effect. 2 of the major books I'll be using today is this Buddhism, One Teacher, Many Traditions, and the Foundation of Buddhist Practice. Kyabje Rinpoche's book has aspects of karma that you don't find anywhere else. And basically all this material is coming from these 2 books down at the bottom here. Lama Tsongkhapa's great treatise, the Lamrim Chenmo. I did a course on this material a number of years ago, and I'm still pulling material out of that course and my understandings from this material to present to you. Geshe Sopa's book here, of course, is a commentary on the material found in the great treatise. Once again, it's in depth, but it's easy to understand and it's presented really well. So all these books are useful. Now today, we're going to look at karma and what we call karmic paths. We'll also look at some of the non-virtuous karmic paths and the results of engaging in a karmic path. Now, I guess the reason for putting up this material is to help us understand how it is that we experience some of the difficulties we presently experience. We can track the results back to the causes and decide that if we don't want to keep having these types of effects now and in the future, we've actually got to stop producing the causes that bring about these effects. So let's have a look at the first topic here, karma and its paths. So we'll be talking about paths of action, and these actions will be either virtuous or non-virtuous or neither. And when it comes to the non-virtuous paths of action, what's required from us is an abstinence or a restraint. If we know that the path of action we could engage in will lead to future suffering, which we will be affected by it, and if we don't want that to take place, we need to restrain ourselves from the action. So what are these paths of action that we need to restrain ourselves from? Well, they're often referred as the 10. The abstinence from a destruction of life, meaning from killing, in other words, from taking what's not given or stealing, unwise and unkind sexual conduct, false speech, divisive speech, harsh speech, and idle talk. And then there's 3 actions of mind, which are having wrong views, having malice, and being covetous. But these are all this is on the negative side, but we also have the positive side. So there would be like, instead of killing, we'd try and save life. Instead of stealing, we would be generous. Instead of being unwise in our sexual behaviors, we'd be wise. We'd be trying to help relationships continue and so forth. So when we're on the positive side, these actions are what they call in the text the white path, or the white actions. And when they're unskillful, they're called the black. And when they're neutral, they give it a color. They're just called neutral. So
we can just call it beige, Eddie.
The beige actions. Yeah. So the virtuous white actions produce the desirable effects of happiness, as you can see here. The non-virtuous, the black, they produce the suffering and the pain. And then we have actions that are neither. Now, when we talk about these 10, we've got this 3 for the body, 4 for speech, and 3 for the mind. And they are not all karma. They are all paths of action, but they're not necessarily karma. And so that's what I want to talk about after we move along from this slide.
Eddie, can I just ask, can you just give a little summary of what a path actually is? Because I think I get it, but I'm not sure. When you're talking about a path, like is it the direction that we're going?
That's going to come up. So just
okay.
Okay. Yeah. So I sort of understand that this is going to be one of the difficulty, right? What's a path of action? What's a path of karma? What is karma? And what's neither of these things in relationship to these 10 activities? So that's what we're going to look at first of all, and then we'll move on and go to the specifics of some of these paths of action. So first of all, when we look at these paths of action, there are 3, but we're really going to focus on just 2 of them. The white and the black, or the virtuous paths and the non-virtuous paths. So these 2 paths, right? So we've got different terms for them in the texts. On the negative side, we see them being called ignoble, harmful, non-dharma, polluted, blameworthy, and paths that lead to suffering. So these would be the 3 of the killing, stealing, unwise sexual behavior, harsh speech, lying, all that sort of stuff that's on the black side. On the white side, we have these behaviors or paths of action, which are called the noble paths of action, the harmless, Dharma paths of action, unpolluted, blameless, and they lead to happiness. One quite simple way of thinking about the Dharma, simple but very useful, is that sometimes it's described as things to not be picked up or to be left alone, and others to be adopted. So something to be abandoned, something to be adopted. You can see what on the ignoble side, the dark, cloudy side, don't pick up these behaviors. They are harmful to you. Like, leave them alone. On the other side, because it's really good, you pick them up. When we find that we have ways of thinking and behaving that are harmful to ourselves and harmful to others, we know that because of the effects they produce. Because we don't want those effects for ourselves or the people we hold dear, we do our best not to engage with them. We don't pick them up. We don't engage with them. On the other side, because we know that they produce happiness, long-term happiness, short-term happiness, for ourselves and for others, we pick up these behaviors. So I found it's a very simple, useful way. It's like, you just don't do this and you do this. Let that side go, pick this side up.
And Eddie, I really like this too, because it makes sense. Instead of just being told, you know, be good and don't do this and do this because I said so, you just look at the results, and we don't want the suffering, so we don't do the thing. It's really practical.
Yeah, so that's why I particularly like it too.
Yeah, rather than say having a whole judgmental thing layered on top of it, it's just much simpler.
Yeah. Okay, so now let's have a look now at these paths of action. What's paths of action, intentions, and karma? So we're going to have a look at that. We're going to begin with a quote from the Noble Asanga. So he says, systemizing the most obvious among them, the Buddha said that the paths of action, virtuous or non-virtuous, are 10. So these are the 10 that we've mentioned, the 3 of the body, 4 of speech, and 3 of mind. And like I said, they're the most obvious among them. There are many, many others, but these are ones we can actually work with directly and understand pretty straightforwardly. So I found what was really interesting here is this term, paths of action. So let's have a look at these paths of action. So these are 10. So let's have these 10, and we're going to focus on, first of all, the non-virtuous ones, but you can also realize there's 10 virtuous ones, right? They're just the opposite. So when you engage in a path of action, any type of action you engage in is made up of parts. These parts are often called branches. So we're doing something, but when you do that thing, it has parts to it. So when we engage in an action, it can be just, these parts can be described in a number of different ways. I'll show you these other ways shortly, but for our purpose at the moment, I'm just going to use where they describe it in terms of 4. The action is made up of 4 parts. So there's a basis for your action. There's an attitude that goes along with your action. You perform the action, and then the action stops. It culminates or is completed. So whenever you engage in an action, like it finishes, it is performed, there's an attitude that goes along with it, and there's a basis involved, meaning it's done to something. It's acted on something that's going to be affected by this action. This is called the basis. Now, sometimes actions are not, although they're always made up of 4 parts, sometimes one of those parts will be weaker than the others. Sometimes the part will be missing. So then they say, well, the action is not complete, which means the effect will not be so will not be as full as it otherwise would have been. So I'll start first of all with these karmic paths, and then I'll talk about them. It'll be hard to get your head around, but then I've got the next slide, which will make it really simple. But I just want to give you something to fill the slide up with, right? So the action is called a karmic path because they're either the cause of an intention or the path that intention travels to perform the action. So what would be simplest, first of all, to just say that all 10 of these actions are karmic paths. All, yeah, that's right. That's just all 10 of these activities are karmic paths. Seven of them are karmas. So if we go across to the three mental karmic paths, they cause an intention, and they lead to unfortunate rebirth. That's why they're called a path. That's one of the reasons why they're called a path. The seven non-virtues of body and speech are also karmic paths because they are the path that intention travels to carry out the intention. And they also paths to unfortunate rebirths. These seven are also karma. So the seven of three of body, four of speech, are karma, and they are karmic paths. The three of mind are karmic paths, but they are not karma. And finally, we have the mental factor of intention. So let's have a look at this here. Here are the three things we're sort of talking about. We've got karma, karmic paths, and afflictions. So when we engage, when you have, when we talk about whether it's suffering or virtue, you have to have two things involved. There are always two things involved. That is karma and affliction. You can't have suffering with just karma and without affliction. Whenever you have an affliction, it's going to produce a karma. And karma and affliction are two different phenomena. So the mental factor of intention, that's what the Buddha said, this is how I refine karma down, not just action, but the action of intention. So there's still actions, but if you go drill down a bit more, it's intention. It's a karmic path? No, it's not. Is it affliction? No, it's not. It's just karma. The seven physical and verbal non-virtues are karma, and they are karmic paths, and they're not afflictions. Whereas the three mental non-virtues, they're not karma. They are karmic paths, though, and they are afflictions. So this goes across whether it's non-virtuous or virtuous. Miffy.
So the three mental non-virtues, are they not karma because they, they're just happening, say in my mind, they don't involve somebody else yet? Is that why they're not karma?
Say that again. I'm not sure what you're getting at here.
So the mental non-virtues, they're not karma, but they're a karmic path. They're an affliction, say,
If
jealousy or covetousness.
If they're an affliction, they're not karma.
Yeah, but they're not karma because I'm asking, because they're just happening in my mind rather than involving another person. And I thought karma involves subject and object.
Yeah, I'm not.
In terms of the 4 parts of a karmic action, karma is it's a relationship. It's not just a one-sided thing. There's 2 involved. So is that why the mental non-virtues aren't a karma, because they're just one-sided?
I'm just going to say I don't know. I can't untangle what you're getting at here. So I'm just going to say I don't know. No.
Donnie just said karma means action.
Yes, it
Is
does.
So that's the difference.
It's an
If it's
action.
just in the mind, it's not an action yet, right?
Could you just say that again? So
If it's not in the mind, if it's just in the mind, it's not yet an action. Is that correct? Is that right? It's in the mind. It's going to become an action, but it's not yet.
Danny says, oh, I'm sorry, go ahead.
no, please, Charlotte. So.
Danny says, when it's just mental, it has not yet produced an effect. And then the second message is, not just thought, though thought can be influenced by past karma.
Yeah, that's all true.
Sorry, explain that very well.
Yeah. It's, for me, it starts off really simple like this. And then when you start to say what some of the questions you're raising, especially the ones that Miffy's raised, it's just like, suddenly the simplicity of it becomes not so simple anymore. I mean, I think this is actually what, like karma is very difficult.
I suppose, Eddie, my question is just to do with why do we even care about whether it's karma or a karmic path or affliction? It makes sense, but I don't kind of get why it's important to know this.
One of the simplest things I thought of was I had to ask myself the same question too, right? And so a lot of people think that just by thinking, these are karmas. They don't separate them out to 2 between, no, this is an action, this is an affliction, it's not a karma. Because when you think that you think, that's an action, isn't it? An activity is taking place. Isn't it? And so, you know, karma's been thought of, first of all, it's like an action in general. Yes, it's an action. When you think, when the thinking process is going on, aren't those actions? There's a creative process going on, one thought leading to another. Those are actions, aren't they? So if you think that, yeah, of course it is. There's an activity going on. Then you might also think, well, that's the karma. I'm creating all this karma. Sometimes don't we read in the text that we're creating karma every moment, every instant? Has anybody read anything like that or heard anyone say that?
Yeah, Lama
every moment.
Lama Yeshe often said about that, you know, like everything is karma.
Yeah. But see, you can see here, this is not the case, is it? They're karmic paths, but they're not karma. That's what I was trying to draw out here.
Hmm.
You know, I did think this would be difficult, not just for you guys, but for me too, thinking, oh my gosh. But I thought I want to try and at least put this up because of what I've heard and what I've read when other teachers have said, you're creating karma all the time. But there's a distinction between karma and karmic path and affliction. So it's true that we're creating many afflictions. The mind is afflicted often, of course. But is that a karma? Anyway, just something to think about. No, it seems quite, in some ways, it's quite straightforward, and in other ways, it's not so straightforward. So for next part, it's a bit simpler, right? Is a question, Shayla?
Yes.
Yeah.
Martin says, imagine a non-virtue, but have no intention to carry it out. Also, Andrew wants to know if there's some online materials for the basics of karma.
Online material?
Yes.
Yeah, I imagine there'd be a lot. And it's often, it won't be like this, that's for sure. What it normally is, I'll talk about these next things we're going to be talking about, these the 10 different actions and so forth and how they're made up. What is offered online, so who was it, Martin? Martin wanted to know this? Online material?
That was Andrew.
Oh, Andrew, sorry. So Andrew, yeah, the stuff we'll go on to right next is what you'll often find online in the material that we did last week.
Okay, yeah, I'll absorb whatever you put up next, and then she gave me all of the last 2 classes slides.
Okay.
Lots of useful information, so
yeah,
appreciate it.
Yeah, and then of course, if you go into deeper like this material, then that's the material by His Holiness the Dalai Lama, Venerable Thupten Chodron, and Geshe Sopa. That's where you find this type of material. So we'll make it a little bit easier now, right, Miffy?
Martin's question about if you imagine a non-virtue but have no intention of carrying it out, you know, like say, I'd assume, say something like a thought of revenge, you fantasize about it, but you have no intention of carrying it out.
Yeah.
So where does that fit in?
This leads us into a whole different thing about what they call karmas that are not accumulated. I mean, there's activity going on and so forth, but they don't actually bring about, let's say, let me do this material, and you'll see when we break it up into the actions, you might be able to work out then go, oh my gosh, actually, when I think about non-virtuous things, for instance, a lot of it will be carried out, but some of it won't be. Like, for instance, you think about killing somebody, but you actually don't. So does that have an effect on you? Well, Sure it does. But because the action was never carried out, you don't accumulate the karma for killing somebody. But that material is what is in another section about what karma accumulated and karma that's not accumulated. So like a karma, to accumulate it, you actually need to have an affliction in your place. And the activities all got to be done with all the parts intact. So I'll show you this material shortly, and then you'll see, oh my gosh, it's deep and wide, and it'll give you plenty to think about, that's for sure. So let's go to the easy part now, right? We just look at some of the actions that are karma and karmic paths. So these will be of the 7 physical and verbal non-virtues in this case. So it's a karma and a karmic path. So the medium of expression here for the karma and karmic path is the body, and they've got those three activities that are put forward: killing, stealing, unwise sexual behavior. And when the Buddha talked about him, he described him as, there is a person who destroys life. He is cruel and his hands are blood-stained. He is bent on slaying and murdering, having no compassion for any living being. He takes what is not given to him, appropriates with thievish intent the property of others, be it in the village or the forest, and he conducts himself wrongly in matters of sex. He has intercourse with those under the protection of father, mother, brother, sister, relatives or clan, or the religious community, or with those engaged to a fiancé protected by law, and so forth. So these are the actions that are done with the body, and they are both karma and the karmic paths. And they're the ones we're really familiar with: killing, stealing, unwise sexual behavior. With speech, again, they are karmas, they're actions, there's an intention that is along with them, and they produce a path that can lead you somewhere. When they're non-virtuous, they lead to greater suffering. If they're virtuous, greater happiness. Harsh speech, divisive speech, lying, and gossip. Now, these are the mind is their mental actions, but they're not karma. They are karmic paths and affliction.
Yeah, so Eddie, when you said that karma is not affliction and affliction is not karma, that's really the crucial point, isn't it? To
That's
not
right.
get those two mixed up.
That's right. And this is especially important when we go through. So we've got this material here, then there's the material in the 4 Noble Truths, and then there's the material in the 12 Links of Dependent Origination. And the material in the 12 Links of Dependent Origination even demonstrates even more clearly what's karma and what's affliction and what is the result of the suffering. And that's another reason why I wanted to sort of bring it to your attention early in the piece. For some of you, this is probably the first time you've heard a presentation like this. And for me, it wasn't too long ago, within the last couple of years, this material has been sort of presented in the way it's been. I've read it going, oh my gosh, that requires a lot of thinking now. And then you get these ideas of when you hear people say everything you do is karma, you got to go, hang on a minute. You can say they're all karmic paths, but they're not all karma, because afflictions are not karma. So there's a general way of speaking about things. But what often happens when you hear people speak generally, you think it's all specific. That's the way it is. In fact, it's
Yeah,
not.
and then we kind of panic or think, well, then there's no hope because it's so overwhelming. But actually, putting it like this makes a lot more sense and less panic.
Yeah, well, that's how I felt before. When you first hear these things, like you're creating karma all the time. It's like, my God, it's like, how do you, how can we get out of this? It's impossible, it seems. So let's have a look at each of these killings. So killing, we know that they are, I'm going to do this over and over again just to get it into, hope to drill it into, right? Killing is a karma and it's a karmic path, and it's the heaviest in terms of a non-virtuous physical path, the weightiest and the heaviest. It can be motivated by desire, hatred, or ignorance. So these are afflictions, right? But they're always completed with hatred. When we come to stealing, it's a karma and a karmic path. It's less weighty than the killing. Motivated again by desire, hatred, or ignorance, these afflictions. They're always completed with desire. Now, I'm just going to add another layer here, and then we'll come to it again. So when I said before that, an action, this karmic path, is made up of parts. Now, I said there had to be a basis for it, an attitude that goes along with it, an action, and a completion. So for the basis for stealing, it has to be somebody other than yourself. In other words, you can't steal from yourself. Right? And the person has to be alive. You can't steal from the dead. Well, you could, but it doesn't produce the karmic. It's not a karmic path. It doesn't produce the same result.
Okay.
And this being, like I said, they have to have a mind, so you can't steal from a tree. It doesn't produce the karmic path, the karmic result.
What about oh, sorry. Well, what about the idea of stealing, like through business or, making sales or something that's a little bit more subtle than overt stealing?
Well, are people going to be affected by it?
Yeah, negatively, because you're selling them some sort of value for way more than maybe what they should be purchasing it for, or you're tricking them.
Yeah, so there was some. So if we get persons involved, okay, we have the basis there. Then the next part you're talking about is the action. How's the stealing done? But before we do that, we have to. There's an attitude involved. So you've got to know that you are taking from a living being, right? And it's somebody else other than yourself. In other words, you sort of correctly identify, well, what am I going to steal? There's an object to be taken. The object belongs to another person. You correctly identify the object to be stolen. Then there's what they call the three poisons. You bring to it either attachment or animosity, or you do it out of ignorance. You don't know that you're stealing, but you are. Then the action itself could be, like I say, taking or asking someone else to take the object. That's all. You get the effect through force, through stealth or deception. So that might come in with the little thing that you raised. It could also be not paying taxes, for instance, is seen as stealing. Not paying fees, tolls, and fares. And also, in terms of the action, not returning an object that you have borrowed. And the action is completed or culminated when you move the object and think that now it's yours. The thing I want you to take away from there, even though there's a lot of detail in here, and there'll be a lot of detail in whatever the action is, it's made up of these parts. I can see them if I'll come to it. It has parts. And the way these parts are described is sometimes it's 3, sometimes it's 4, sometimes it's 5, sometimes it's 6. It just depends upon the teacher or the text you're reading and how much depth they want to provide you with. Now, Miffy, you had your hand up?
Oh, yeah, I was just thinking when I first heard about having something and not returning a borrowed thing, that one really got me, because I, borrowed all these fantastic clothes off my girlfriends. But in my mind, it was like, oh, now I've got them. And then I had to get really honest and go, oh, no, I have no intention of giving these back. I better actually give them all back. Sometimes it was years later.
Yeah. Yeah, I wouldn't be surprised this is the case for many of us. Yeah, I was going to say this up for me. I go, no, it's not. I have a lot of books, but it's not the case that I borrow books and never give them back. I always give them back because I like my own books, I guess, and I would like mine to be given back. But like I said, what I want to point out is that, we just have this action called stealing. It is a karma, it is a karmic path in terms of its weight, what's driving the action and how it's completed. So that's part there, but also beneath that or supporting that is like, they've got this weighty thing here, which I'll also show you. But the action, like I said, it's got these 4 parts. There's a basis, an attitude. The basis here, like I said, it's the object being taken from somebody else. Oh, next one is this, so there are different ways of describing this this fault here. Andrew's got his hand raised. Yep, Andrew.
Yeah, what if like some of these edge cases where you're stealing from someone who is corrupt or not paying taxes against an unjust government, or like what if there's like a little bit of ambiguity between right and wrong, if you're trying to survive or you're under the rule of like an unjust force or power.
Yeah, so then it's like, so that's when you need to look at how the action is constructed. But so, like I said, the activity itself is made up of different parts. So you go through it, you look and say, okay, so what's the attitude here? Well, yes, I am going to take something that belongs to somebody else. So the basis is in place. Now, what's the attitude? Can you correctly identify what you're going to take? You go, yes, I am. What is driving you to do this?
Survival and.
Okay, so that's personally involved. That's it. Okay, keep going. Yeah.
And then also maybe it could be possibly to change the power dynamic and overthrow an opposition or an enemy.
So then you can say those 2 attitudes. You go, are those attitudes virtuous or non-virtuous?
I wasn't here from the beginning, so I can't really identify.
Yeah. Okay. So then we have this thing. So what's driving the action? Well, one of them is desire, attachment to oneself.
That's non-virtuous.
I'm trying to survive. I need that. Blah blah blah. So this is how we can work things out. But like I said, it takes a bit of work, doesn't it? It looks simple on the surface, but we break it down. So that was you, Andrew, wasn't it? Was that Andrew?
That's me.
Yeah. So that's also in the next a couple of slides coming up. So I'll come to that again.
Okay, yeah? Awesome.
So here, like once again, it's a karma, it's a karmic path. It's the lightest in terms of killing and stealing. So killing and stealing are heavier than being unwise and unkind in your sexual behavior. In general, right? So in general, so it could be motivated by desire, hatred, or ignorance, one of these 3 poisons, what they call the 3 poisonous minds, but they're always completed with desire. So here, we see these words like desire, and straight away we might think, oh, desire, so all desire is bad. No, it's not. When we're new to the Buddha Dharma and these teachings, you see words like this, and we understand them as we're English-speaking people and so forth. But when it's put into here, we're talking about paths of action that produce suffering, then the desire can't be a positive desire. It can't be virtuous desire. It has to be a negative type of desire. So here we call this desirous attachment. I'm just saying these things because it's very simple to forget the context of the things in which we're speaking. Now, so here's this thing that might be useful for you, for everyone here, particularly for Andrew. When we behave, so here I've put stages of, I've just chosen this one, right? And I put it up because we're lay people here, and this is where most of us will not be out killing people. We actually know when we're stealing, but this is, desire drives most of us. We're in the desire realm, so this is where we can go wrong. And so I thought, well, let's put this one up. Won't be too much detail, but that's why I put it up. So here's a very simple way of describing paths of action, karmas. There's always, so we have an intention, there's the action of it doing, and then it's finished. It culminates a sense of satisfaction. I got what I wanted. Simple way of doing it. This can be broken down into four. You've got the basis and attitude. Now the action and performance are there. So these action and performance are there, satisfaction and culmination. But intention has two things now, basis and attitude. Here can be broken down again into 5. And like I said, there's also a 6th presentation where it gets broken down even more and more.
So, Eddie, these different ways of breaking it down are really useful when we have really ambiguous situations like what Andrew was talking about, because that's when you need more detail to figure out the nuances of it. So this is like the roadmap then of how to figure out the nuances instead of just like kidding ourselves or using some kind of made up justification. We can really analyze it with this.
Yes, and if we don't, it's very easy to overestimate the harm that we're doing to ourselves or someone else, or underestimate it. There's always these two extremes involved. But once you can dig down into it and look at the parts that make things up, you get a clearer picture of what you've actually done and what types of results they can produce. And so, like I said, so many of us, because we don't know the details involved, we make quick jumps in our mind, and then, like I said, so we overestimate the harm that we may have created, or underestimate it. Or on the positive side, overestimate and underestimate. But those are the two things that are often going on where we don't get a sort of detailed picture of it. And so, you know, when we have just the simple one, the 3, then you've got to sort of understand when it's 4, 5, and 6, they're all in there somewhere. And when you get some of the different texts and you see it, they'll sort of break it down. You'll at least go and go, oh, this is the presentation of 4 parts. Then you might go up and get a teaching, like I've had up at Chen Resnick Institute, and suddenly it's 3 parts. And then you'll pick up a book like Geshe Sopa or by His Holiness, and there's 5 or 6 parts. It's like, oh my God, what's going on? Well, this is what's going on. It's just a difference in depth and width of explanation for our understanding. So next slide is a quote from His Holiness, taken from a book called The Four Noble Truths. So as you can see, it says, it is important to appreciate that since there are different stages to every act, karmic actions are themselves composites, and their quality can be characterized as the cumulative result of each of these composing factors. Now, what are some of these composing factors? So these next three slides, again, I'm just going to show you like the stages and then how the stages themselves can be affected. So using this example of the unwise and unkind sexual behavior. So the basis would be like, here's part of it, a person you shouldn't be having sex with. Wrong part of, a part of the body that you shouldn't be having, the time or the place. So all of this is contained within what they call the basis. Now, the thing to remember about this presentation too is, you know, you got to ask yourself, so why are we getting this presentation anyway? The reason I've come to is that the goal is to get out of cyclic existence, to put an end to it. What keeps you in cyclic existence are unskillful actions driven by afflictions. Now, when I read this here, an improper person, if I look at this myself, I could go, yep, I've had sex with an improper person. Orifices, in terms of description, yep, wrong. Time, yep, wrong. Place, yep, wrong. So that's just me. Probably some of you might be a bit different, but it might be the same. Right? So, and as we go through, you know, of course, I perceived the person I wanted to do. I had a motivation for doing. There was an affliction driving me. Of course, that takes place. There's the performance, and it culminates with some sort of pleasure that's experienced. And so this is, like I said, the four parts. It's broken, you know, so like I've spoken to people and said, well, you know, the thing about orifice, what's wrong with the mouth? What's wrong with having anal sex? What's the big deal here? And really the thing is, it increases desire. And desire is what keeps you in cyclic existence. So you go like, look, these places don't have sex in them. So, you know, you get some sort of restraint. Like I know, like when I was much younger, it's like, let's have sex in places where we shouldn't have it. But that's exciting, isn't it? That's fun. We call that fun and exciting. Here the Buddha's saying, oh, no, don't do it. Restrain yourself in some way. Less desire. Time, these times, but not these times. The orifices, you're going to go, okay, it's basically just ordinary sex, you know, what you call vanilla sex. That's it. Like, why? Because every time you have sex, like it's an act that often comes out of desire. It increases desire. That keeps you locked in. And we're trying to get out. So that's why I think they have these many, you know, when you have a look at Lamrim Chenmo and Lama Tsongkhapa's presentations, like, oh my gosh, it's like you must become ordained. Miffy, yep.
Yeah, this is so nice and clear, because many times I think from a Western point of view, we hear about this and it's like a case of the contaminated vessel. We bring in our whole cultural judgmentalism, whereas this is actually not about, therefore you're a bad person, but it's purely about behavior. And so it makes so much sense.
Behavior. Yeah, that's right. Yep, Lou.
Question I would have is, when we're discussing things like orifice, what is to say that itself, seeing the time when the Lamrim was written, that is not a cultural bias?
I'd say the orifice is not a cultural bias. No, that goes right across humans altogether. Huh? Place So in the language is like you don't have the sex in rooms close to your teachers. You don't have them near stupas. You don't have them in the meditation hall and so forth. Right? These are inappropriate places for having sex. So in terms of our culture, it'd probably be don't do it on the church doorstep. If you're in the church and nobody's in there, don't have it in there. So you could say some of it could be cultural bias, but some of it I would go like, no, basically not necessarily here. But you might think that. So Miffy, what time does this course finish? Is it half past or?
Yep.
Okay. So again, these are just the 4, and this goes across for all the actions. Shayla, yep.
I guess I'm a little confused when it comes to orifice. Sorry to come back to this. Does that include somebody who identifies in the LGBTQ community? Would one of those orifices be wrong for them? Or like, say I'm a gay man, maybe the vagina is not a good orifice for me.
Eddie, I've had some rip-roaring arguments or debates with Venerable Robina about this very thing. And it was fantastic because she just blew the cobwebs out of my mind. So basically, again, it's about if just the more you have sex, the more you want to have sex. And so she just had to like beat it into my mind, beat it into my head that this isn't about sex being wrong, but it's about from the point of view of liberation, we're trying to restrain our desires.
Yeah.
So it's a really big picture that when we're just talking about worldly life, that's a really small part of it. And if we just take it from that worldly life point of view, we're going to get it distorted in our mind.
Right. Yeah. So this, that's a good point, Miffy. And this is also I was trying to bring out. It's like they're not. It's like the big picture thing, Shayla. Right? It's like saying, look, if you're seeking liberation, then a lot of this is going to be problematic for you.
And the whole thing of like becoming ordained, it's about restraint entirely of sexuality.
So if you're ordained, you're not going to have these problems, are you? Because like any sex at all will downfall, right? It's just if you look at this, it's going, well, this is really a lot about, well, for us in particular, laypersons.
Right? And because people are ordained and they take the vow of celibacy, it's not a judgment on sexuality. It's a way, it's a method of restraint to get out of samsara. So it's like our paradigms are completely different from a worldly point of view or this one of seeking liberation.
Yeah, so now I'm going to introduce you to two other phenomena that also play a part in these 4 stages. And they're basically called the weight and the strength. So when we come to like the attitude, it's like, if it's intense hostility, intense desire, or intense indifference, that's going to have a different effect if it's not hostile, less desirous attachment and so forth. I think that should be obvious to all of us, isn't it? Yeah. Then the performance itself. So you can see here, there are five things to consider. So, sorry, wasn't Andrew was, sorry, I've forgotten one of the students who was here who raised the thing about the stealing.
Yeah, that was me.
Yeah. So here again, you can see how the activity of stealing, or in this case, unwise and unkind sexual behavior, the degree of effect depends on the degree of cause. And like I said, so in particular, the Lamrim Chenmo and the commentary on it by Geshe Sopa, they go into quite great depth in all this material. And so I've just sort of taken it across, put it up in a, I don't know what you call this, but it's not a table, but something like it, just to put all the major parts in there, just to show you that oftentimes when you hear talks on karma, it seems quite straightforward and simple. In fact, it's not as simple as you first hear it. This is, like I said, this is very useful for us because many times like we overestimate perhaps the strength or the weight of the virtuous things we've done and the non-virtuous things we've done. The strength. So all of these things have a different sort of weight and strength. But here we give just the 4 things to consider. And as I said again, when you read the material, there's a lot of it. There's pages of it going through each of these 10 paths of action. Now, what they're all going to produce, unless they're interfered with, is a result of some type. And these results are basically, they're often presented as 3 types of result, but actually there's 4, because one of them has got 2 parts. So there's always called like a ripening result. And then we have the causally concordant result. And there you've got the 2, right? It can either be an experience or it can be in behavior. And finally, there's an environmental result. And again, each of these results will differ independent upon the strength and the weight and whether the action was actually carried out with all of its parts intact. So I'll just say a little bit by His Holiness. He says, the karmic result corresponds to the ethical nature of the action, which is primarily determined by the intention that motivated it. So when you go away from this class, please, just like Lama Zopa always requests us or reminds us, the motivation. Remember the motivation. Check your motivation. This is really the most, like I said, when Buddha made this little difference about karma and action, it's motivation. So Barbara?
Yes, hi.
Barbara.
My question is, does ignorance or willful ignorance play a part in any of this? For example, you'll hear an older man sometimes on the news or something going, I didn't know she was underage, or, in like killing, for example, somebody will go to the supermarket and buy a steak and come home and feel completely, unbothered by the fact that they didn't kill the animal because somebody else did it and they really weren't there or a party to it. And, in the stealing example, there was a really comical thing that happened in the US recently where a guy took a taxi cab and had the cab driver hand the bank teller through the drive-through the note to rob the bank, that he demanded all the money. And this guy had no idea that he was handing, a bank robbery note. And when he found out, he stayed and waited for the police. But like I questioned myself, am I ignorant and not aware that I'm doing anything that is, planting these karmic seeds? Or is my ignorance a part of my, these karmic seeds ripening, and I have to pay that, kind of like deal with that? So I was just wondering if you could comment on that role of, of ignorance.
Yeah, so of course, these, like I said before, we have these three major forces called like ignorance and desirous attachment, lust, and hatred, or wishing to do harm, driving the activity. And so when we talk about like ignorance, one of them, there's different levels of ignorance, different forms of it. So one of them might be just not knowing what you're doing. But the other one, another one might be knowing what you're doing, but not caring. So you might say it's like willful ignorance, willfully ignoring the effects of the action I'm about to do. So yes, so of course, so there's, once again, there are outcomes for that type of ignorance. What they might be, you can only sort of generally surmise by looking, what can I say, looking through this material and looking at its strength, the weight of it, the basis that it was performed against, and so forth. So that's all I can really suggest you do, Barb. Otherwise, it's sort of like general, but if I speak too much in general, then there's always you can sort of, but what about this and what about that? And you go, yeah, what about it? Now we have to look at this action again. And it'll always differ depending upon what you bring to it. Miffy?
Eddie, also right at the beginning when you said about karma has that intention in there. And so if it's a positive intention or a negative one, or the beige intention, is that more like the ignorant one?
Well, yeah, like I said, so people do things that they don't actually know what they're doing, but then others do things that they know what they're doing, but they just don't care. And so there are mitigating factors for all these things. So that's also in the text where they talk about what is it? Oh gosh, it's just slipped my mind. Yeah.
Eddie, and also then that's a way that we can actually come to some comfortable feeling in ourselves. Say, for instance, with same-sex marriage, that the intention there is love. So, there's no way that can be wrong.
No,
yeah, so that's the main guiding principle right there.
So when we look at these results, like I said, there's three major ones, but you can break them up into four. And when we talk about the fruitional result, we're really talking about the rebirth. But that's really nice and simple, isn't it? Yeah. So in other words, when the action that you've committed brings the great result, if it's a negative action produces a great result, it's rebirth in the hellish realms. If it's a medium, it's rebirth as a hungry ghost. It's small, it's rebirth as an animal. But in the negative space of activity of karmic paths, the fruitional result will always be corresponding to the causes that produce it, which in other cases is negative, which is black, which is suffering. That's nice and simple there, right? And that's where this thing of going, you never do, in terms of the fruitional result, it's never the case that you do something bad and the result is good. In fruitional, no, that is not the case. Now, Andrew, you have something to ask?
Yeah, just because there's so many different levels of justification and right and wrong that I think humanity as a whole is complicit in like deforestation, or which destroys homes for sentient beings, or like that example of purchasing meat in the grocery store, that we all have a sense of that we're sitting on wooden chairs and we're doing something that is quite harmful, like for us to even exist, that we have to
Sure.
take away from other sentient beings out there. So who is the judge that's going to look at us and say, this is the level of right and wrong, when we're all
Okay.
a part of like that desire for killing and
Sure.
death and the
Okay.
worst
So the judge, Andrew, is the result.
well, the result is always bad with those things that I mentioned.
Well, there you go.
So we're all going to be rebirthed or reborn into hell and
Well,
forever
no, like I
condemned.
said, the result depends upon the causes. Yeah?
Well, the causes desire and intention, and we all know that we're doing something that's destroying the planet. So to some degree, or maybe some people don't, but I think we mostly know that we're doing something intentionally horrible and causing death.
So the teachings of karma are to show us what these effects are and how they're produced by the causes, right? So does this mean that when we've produced the cause, we must experience the result? The answer is no. That's why all this material's there,
Okay.
to make changes.
Well, I don't
Yeah.
understand, because I think, wouldn't we be experiencing the result because we know what we're doing and we know that it's wrong, and yet we do it anyways? And,
Like I said,
yet the result
like I
happens.
said, so we've got these different results, right? Let's just stop here for a moment. The fruitional result always corresponds to the cause. So like, for instance, like we go, okay, so here we are as human beings. Yeah. So that's the rebirth result. What could have caused it? Or what can you say, what did not cause it?
What could have caused our existence as human beings, that we're
Yeah, that's right.
here?
Yeah.
Um,
What was it,
well,
virtue or non-virtue?
Well, you could say that we're born into, this amazing opportunity, and it's like a divine existence.
But what caused it? Is it virtue or non-virtue?
I don't know. I would guess virtue based off of what you've been saying.
Well, if this is a good result, then you have to have a good cause. That's cause and effect. They're concordant, right? Like I said, the four principles are: we do not do something good and get something bad, especially in fruitional results. That's never the case. Good produces good, bad produces bad.
But yet, so we're born into something good, but we still have free will to
mess it up.
enact.
Yep, that's dead right. That's right. So we got this opportunity, the fruitional result of a human being within the desire realm. We find ourselves interested in Dharma. We've got to go, one of the questions is, well, why am I here? How am I here? What am I meant to be doing here? We get teachings on karmic cause and effect. But we've got to know from where we are right now, we can infer logically, this is a good fruitional result. Therefore, the causes that produced it cannot have been negative or non-virtuous, because those causes, where they're small, produce rebirth as an animal, a hungry ghost, or the hell realm being. We are not those entities. We're not those persons. We are humans.
But you're saying in the next life that we could be reborn based off of our actions in this lifetime? Or?
That's right. We could end up as reborn as an animal, a hungry ghost, or a hell realm being, or once again as a human being. That's entirely up to us.
But is it like kind of overconfident to say that we are all complicit in acts of death and other things that hurt animals and other things that would make us reborn?
So let's say we are. How complicit? How complicit?
Very complicit. Like, if somebody, we're all sitting on wooden chairs, or whatever, something that we're taking a resource from another animal.
Okay, so are we as complicit as the person who cut down the tree?
I say yes because we purchased
Well, we're
knowing where it came from.
Okay, so we're not. That's the idea of going into so much detail about karmic cause and effect. It's not all across the board, we're all the same. That is not the case. Yeah. Otherwise, why go into so much detail?
Well,
Why
I think it's just to determine and use that logic to figure out where you stand. But I maybe it's my own personal view that we are just as bad as the executioner, but we're just trying to protect ourselves by going to the grocery store or
No,
by
well,
purchasing from a
okay.
big
Okay,
box
so-
corporation.
Okay, so even in the ordinary life of the courts, ordinary ways, this is not the view of the world, and certainly not the view in terms of karmic cause and effect. Miffy?
Yeah, Eddie, there's something, and Andrew, that changes here. So like a little kid that's sitting on a wooden chair who doesn't know about where it came from, certainly isn't as complicit as the forestry people. But there's kind of this thing that happens that as we become educated and find out, then we become more complicit. And because we know, then because of that, then we have a responsibility to do something. And so, but there are the nuances in that. And I think it's really important that we recognize those nuances, because otherwise we end up feeling really, really guilty for things that we had no intention about. And like Eddie was saying, karma is mostly about the intention that we have.
And so there are different types of results that are brought about in dependence upon the causes that produce them and the weight and strength of those causes. So there's some sort of other action that took place. It was heavy, it had some sort of strength, there was degrees of strength, degrees of heaviness. They produce results that have some sort of relationship to that cause.
Eddie,
So,
I have
uh,
a question. I have a
okay.
question that builds on what Andrew said. And that is, now I'm wondering, why is it even a virtue to be born human when it is, in fact, humans destroying the entire planet with, polluting it, putting
So hang
plastic
on.
in
So
the ocean?
first of all,
Why is that a virtue? It's
being a
not caused by
human,
hungry ghosts or animals. They're not doing it. It is humans doing it.
being human is a result of virtue created in the past, but having a human being birth in itself is not virtuous, it's neutral.
So Eddie, that points out it's a real tragedy then that we have that, that human beings is a result of virtue. And yet, so, we've been virtuous in the past and now we have this virtuous result. And what are we doing with it? So much destruction.
Yep, and that's right. And if you go, why? Because we don't know how karmic cause and effect work. That's why there's this massive presentation on it. We all know we're all trying to be happy, and are we producing the happiness we desire? No. So something's right out of whack here. Really out of whack. None of us want to suffer, yet we all are. All want to be happy. How many of us are? Very, very few. That's showing we don't know how to act. The teachings of karmic cause and effect is to show us how to act. What is producing the effects that we don't want? What will produce the results that we do want? That's why this is all here. And it also shows why we're so confused. We don't know.
Martin says, born human gives you the ability to change things. And
Yep.
Donnie says, precious human rebirth is contingent on multiple factors.
Yep, that's both true. Yep. And Andrea, you've got your hand up. Do you want to say something?
Yeah, just from going from the innocent child to the educated adult that with that understanding, I guess the conclusion is of like some of this is that we have some sort of responsibility. But then it's just kind of like a cyclical argument because we're born into the actions of our ancestors and potentially like past lives, just like not to complicate this, but just that we have some sort of responsibility to make up for what's already going on and that we're already kind of born into. We're born onto the wooden chair. We're born into the death of these animals. We're born into the death of the destruction of the environment. And so at least from a logical like perspective, or like a view of the world that we're in, it's not so virtuous what we're born into as this innocent creature that's supposed to have a blank slate, and yet we're
Okay, Andrew, there aren't any innocent creatures with blank slates.
okay. So that's not
When we talk
what
about karmic cause and effect, we've got to be talking about past lives, present life, future life. This is what this presentation is about.
Okay.
Okay, so this is one type of result, a fruitional result. We have two other types of result. So as you can see, there are two types of results similar to the causes. We have results corresponding to experiences and results corresponding to behavior. So for instance, right, suppose in the past, what am I going to say? So before we had the ripening result, right, ripening fruition. Suppose in this life, we are a mass murderer, a person who delights in killing, and we are out there finding as many places as we can be in to take the life of others. So if nothing interferes with that behavior, and come the time of our death, especially at the time of death, at the time of our death, we die with a virtuous mind. Even though all of our behaviors before it were very cruel and unkind, and we delighted in killing. Yet at the time of death, the very moment, suppose we had regret for what we've done. Virtuous state of mind at the moment of death, its result is rebirth as a human being. That's one of the results. So we take that rebirth, right? We for the moment, we escape rebirth in the lower realms. We find ourselves as a human being. Yet as a human being, we will have experiences similar to the killings. Results correspond to the behavior. So for instance, we might have a very short life. Or we might find ourselves cruel once again. So these, when they talk about these types of results similar to the cause, these here are really talking about effects that are experiences by the human beings in the upper realms. They're not in the lower realms. They didn't get the fruitional result of the lower realm. They got the fruitional result of the higher realm. Yet they still have to have behaviors and experiences that corresponded to things they've done in the past. And that's all that this is talking about. Miffy?
Yeah, Eddie, I found this one really helpful because, in my life, I've been betrayed a lot in relationships, but I haven't betrayed anybody. And so this one kind of helps me get my head around it, because it's like, it's not just about this life. These, things can happen to you in this life that you're going, why is this happening to me? I've never done it to anybody else.
Right. And it really helps us answer that question, or like Andrew put up before about innocence, right? Why do bad things happen to good people? This can't be explained unless you take in the effect of past lives, which is, this presentation of karmic cause and effect is about. We cannot rule out past life. So we're talking about the past life, the life we're presently in, because if we've had a past, we're going to have a future life. In fact, the present life we've got is the future from a past life. So what we're doing matters a great deal. So knowing that, having an understanding of karmic cause and effect, we can start to alter our behavior. We change. We make deliberate changes. We intend to change. Andrew?
I think Susan was first, or it's up.
Thanks, Andrew. Thank you. Yeah, I was just thinking, Andrew, of what Andrew was, that last scenario you produced. Isn't that a result of collective karma? People born into this world now are born into a world suffering greatly from climate change, which is, as I interpret it, collective karma. And I don't know how to separate the difference really between individual karma and collective karma. And I don't know who does. Who's the judge, the arbiter of that?
There aren't, like I said, so when we say this is who's going to judge, the results of the judge. There isn't any external judgment taking place here. It's just you do something, there's an effect.
Yes, but if you're born into a dying world,
Yeah.
isn't that collective karma rather than a karma that an individual, that the individual being born produced?
You as the individual, that's your individual karma, but you share it with all the other number of people that also find themselves in the same world. There's the collective karma. Which leads us to this last type of result, what they call the environmental result. So look over here very clearly, but it's bad. It's got, as we know, right, our oceans are covered with so much garbage. All around the world, it's problems everywhere, isn't there? Smoke, pollution, it's on and on and on, right? So this is what that's a result. And in terms of how it affects the person, it's called the environmental result. The environment they find themselves in.
So Eddie, with environmental results, or like a collective karma it's necessarily a personal result as well as being an environmental result. Yeah. So the environment's shared, but some people are able to leave their environment and others aren't. So that's a real difference in the personal result.
And there's also the case that to the view of most people, the environment might seem like terrible. But one person within that environment, that's not the case at all.
Yeah, the person with the business of removing rubbish, their business is booming.
Yeah. Or like, say, suppose we find ourselves all in a prison. So our environment is the prison we're in. But what's the responses within that prison? They're all different, aren't they? Each person could have a different response to the prison they find themselves in. So one person in that prison could create more suffering for themselves and those around them, whereas the other person could see this as a means to bring about their own liberation.
Andrew has his hand up.
Yep, Andrew, yep.
Just kind of going back to the final piece of let's say you come into this world with knowing that you have, like in my situation, a lot of past life karma, or I know that I'm carrying like this heavy burden to overcome some of these things, and that is really clear. Resolving that, is that just from being a good person, or is there something more that's like a part of the final step to resolve some of that bad energy? Or
so there's in one of the teachings called Buddha nature. The teaching is on Buddha nature, Andrew. So they say that one of the signs of having Buddha nature is the wish to overcome your suffering. So in other words, like all beings have the potential to be free, but it requires us first of all to recognize that suffering is taking place. So if that's the case with yourself, this is a great thing. This is a very good thing. What we need to know is like, well, how do I do it? What do I got to pick up and what do I got to put down? And this is a lot about that. So I hope that's sort of useful to you in some way.
Yeah, that definitely helps.
finally, this is quote, the Buddha says, possessed of my own deeds, I am the inheritor of deeds, kin to deeds, one who has deeds as a refuge. Whatever deeds I shall do, whether good or evil, I shall become the heir of it. Now, what you can also misunderstand this quote, right? To get this quote clearly in your own mind, you have to know who I is. What we call me, I. Right? Because you are not the person from 10 lifetimes ago who created so many problems that you're now experiencing them in this life. So you need to be clear here about how I exists. Otherwise, you can misunderstand this and sort of sink yourself in the water. But but this is really about some of these other things a number of you said about what's it called? Like, who's the judge? Who's judging here? The judge. I said, well, the result. You look at the result and you go, well, is that suffering, or is this a suffering, a result of suffering or virtue? What's it doing to me? What's it creating?
Eddie, time is overing.
Yep, it sure is.
It's overed.
Look, so what I want to, before we do it, what's our takeaway, right? You know that whether they're non-virtuous paths or virtuous paths, they're always made up of parts. And you have to understand that sometimes you describe as 3, 4, 5, 6, perhaps even more. So every activity is made up of parts. And you know what they're doing here, what they can produce. What you want to do with this material is find out what not to do, because it can lead you to these terrible results. Right? And knowing that, don't do them. Failing that, do them less. Make sure you leave parts out. Make sure, like, once you do something that's mistaken or wrong, it's going to immediately regret it. Immediately. That cuts away its strength immediately. The culmination of it is not strong. Act against it. We, as human beings, have this ability to think. Take what your understanding of what you think about now in terms of this course. Stop doing some things and do others. Weaken the negative things, strengthen the positive things. So like next week, what I want to do is, because I had to look at this course and I said, hang on, it's about what we should be doing, like with our knowledge of karma, like in this life. How can we use our understanding of it in this life, make better lives for ourselves and so forth. So I actually want to look at this thing called karma and what supports it, the affliction. Because once you see also that, you see the possibility for change. Like, change is always there, but you could miss it. Because we're just getting at what we call karma wrongly in some way. So I just want to bring out how we can get it wrong and show you so you can stop doing it and make it all workable again, because it is workable.
Eddie, we better dedicate quick and not lose our good karma.
No, you can't lose good karma doing good. So, nevertheless, due to the merits of our virtuous actions, may we quickly attain the state of the Guru Buddha and lead all living beings without exception into that enlightened state. And may the supreme jewel bodhicitta not yet born arise and grow. May that born have no decline but increase forevermore, so that as long as space abides, as long as sentient beings remain, may we too abide to dispel their suffering. Thank you, everyone, for putting up with this explanation. I mean, there's so
That
much to
was
think about.
incredible.
Thank you, trying. Thank you for trying so hard. And I do hope you'll be here next week. And we can continue.
Absolutely. That was an amazing debate. I loved every second of it. I don't know about you guys, but I want to thank everybody for participating. It was incredible.